Hey everyone, I am Andrew Burkle. Thank you so much for joining us here on Facebook Live. We are live here in the WLNS Digital Studio in Lansing, talking a little bit of MSU football today. And joining us is the MSU football analyst, Jason Strayhorn. Oops, cut the wrong video there. There we go. Jason, how you doing today, man? Thanks for joining us. And obviously a little bit better of a note this week compared to the last few weeks, huh?
Yeah, doing a lot better this week. You know, everything is a little bit brighter, and on a cold October day like today, things are a little bit warmer after a nice victory over the Badgers on homecoming, to say the least. That was a great, thrilling victory in double overtime for Michigan State. Just a great overall game.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jason, the reason you are joining us today is to promote a little bit about your podcast, This is Sparta. So tell us a little bit about your podcast, what you guys are trying to do. It's you, Otis, and J.U. Kulkrick starting a brand new thing here. So tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah, the new podcast is called This is Sparta at MSU, and you can catch it on YouTube, obviously, Spotify, iHeartRadio, any of the places that you can find your podcast. But we are also on Twitter and Facebook as well. It's us three former players that give people a very in-depth look at what it's like to play for Michigan State and what it's like behind the scenes as well, and it gives you a good picture into the mind of the player, the athlete. As fans are getting more and more educated throughout the course all over the United States through things like fantasy football and John Madden football. We're giving you more of a realistic view from a player's perspective to see what makes them tick, what can aid them in victory as a fan, because fans do participate and have a very, very big role in what the outcomes of some of the games are. As you saw this past weekend against the Badgers with a couple of offside calls, illegal procedures, because it got a little loud in there with those towels swirling in Spartan Stadium.
Yeah, it's just a totally different energy with those towels. I don't know what it is. I've been to a couple games that have the towels. I don't know. It sparks the fans like nothing else. But speaking of a player's perspective, obviously Michigan State was coming off those 4 straight losses, including the blowout loss to Ohio State, blowout loss to Minnesota. But despite that, they pull out this huge win on homecoming. From your player's perspective, how huge is this in the locker room and that morale, especially going forward into a huge game against Michigan?
Well, I can tell you, this is absolutely huge because it shows the proof of what they've been doing. I tell you what, you and I talked off air a little bit about this, and we've been really beating the tables about this, about how mentally tough this team really is. And this team, after the high projections, after coming off an 11-win season, looking at Big Ten championship operation this year, having those devastating losses after the pile up, it's very conceivable to see that this team could have eroded from within and started infighting. You see that on a lot of teams that have much better records than what Michigan State just went through. But this team continues to practice, almost like a team that's undefeated, with a lot of purpose, because they understand how close they really are. You hear head coach Mel Tucker talking a lot about blocking out the noise and just focus on the next play. And that's exactly what they've been able to do. And you see them do that in this last game against Wisconsin when, the chips were down. I mean, there were several times throughout the course of the game they could have closed it out at the end of regulation with an interception. And in the first overtime, could have closed it out. But there were things that some teams and some players would have said, oh, man, this is going to come back to bite us. But you can't think that way if you're going to play winning football. You have to think about the next play. And that's exactly what they did, and they ended up coming out with a victory in double overtime in front of the homecoming fans.
So something I've been trying to figure out here is how good do you think this Wisconsin team is, and how much is this going to translate going forward here for Michigan State? Obviously, you stop the bleeding. That's huge. You get the season turned back around in a lot of ways. But how good is this Wisconsin team, and how much is this going to translate to the rest of the season here?
And look, this is a good Wisconsin team. They did have a coach that was fired a couple of weeks ago in Paul Chryst, but he had a great record. Think about it. He was 6-1 in bowl games. He's won the Western Division, been to the Big Ten Championship a lot. They've got great players on that side of the ball. So it wasn't a situation where you're looking at a team that's so less talented than Michigan State. It was a double overtime game. The week before that, after Paul Chryst was let go, they knocked off a pretty stout Northwestern team. Has had had their issues too, but they beat them 42-7. It was almost a shutout win against Northwestern Wildcats. So this is a team that was re-energized when Leonard was named the coach, a guy who was a former player at the University of Wisconsin, played in the NFL for 10 years, guy that was a walk-on player. So he's a very inspirational guy and had the team really rolling. So they believed that they could come into Michigan State and win the ball game. And Michigan State was able to rally and really step up. You look at their average in total offense and total defense prior to the game, it was identical. 342.3 yards in offense, and they were giving up 342.3 yards of defense against them in every game, and they exceeded that on the offensive side of the ball, and then they were well under that, only giving up 289 yards to Wisconsin and being able to shut down that attack that they had. Because, look, that running back they have, Braylon Allen, this is a kid over 1,500 yards in the last 18 games. I mean, this is not a slouch type of running back. He did have 123 yards against the Spartans. Don't get that. But they were able to shut the team down because it's a team game. And that's what Mel Tucker talks about with the complementary football. You've seen it on display on Saturday, and we look for that to continue to propel them as they get healthy for this much-needed bye week before the big game coming up down the road here.
Yeah, speaking of the bye week, I wanted to ask you, as a former player, again here, obviously that's kind of what you guys like to talk about from your point of view of being a former player. What was that bye week like? Obviously everyone has an idea of what it is, but is it truly like a relief point in the season? Is it, all right, I'm going to kick back and relax for a week, or is it more so, hey, let's prep, let's take this as an opportunity? Does it just depend on the coach? What was your experience like with the bye week?
I'll tell you this, there's not a football player in America, especially when it's in the middle of the season like this, that isn't looking forward to that bye week. And it's for one reason and one reason only, and that's to get healthy, man. You want to get healthy. There's not a football player in America after the first day of camp who doesn't have bumps and bruises. You have the aches and pains. But guess what? Guess who cares about that when you're going up to suit up and play on Saturday? Nobody cares. So you've got to figure out a way to push through it and suck it up, if you will, and get your treatments in. That's the thing that people don't really see. They don't have, a good picture as to what it takes to get ready for a game. And you understand that there's practice and there's probably a little bit of meetings, but if you're going to be really good, you've got to do a lot more film study and a ton of treatment. And treatment is that extra icing and stim for your muscles and joints, pool therapy, massage, things that take time away from your social calendar, in order to have your body respond the way that you want it to on any given Saturday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, depending on what level you're playing this game at. So Michigan State right now, during this bye week, you're going to see a lot of film study. You're going to see a little work on the field, but a whole lot of training room, therapy to make sure guys are healthy enough to be able to respond 2 weeks from now against the team down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the game that's on everyone's mind, and in a lot of ways, could turn the season completely around. This last game against Wisconsin, kind of like I mentioned, stop the bleeding. But there is some lessons I think Michigan State will be able to take away. But I'm wondering what you're thinking. They held Wisconsin to 131 passing yards. At certain times, it looked like East Lansing High School could have gotten 131 yards passing against Michigan State the last few weeks. Is this Michigan State just getting healthy, or is this something that they may have figured out against Wisconsin?
This is number one. Number three, Xavier Henderson. That's why. Xavier Henderson was actually on the field, and he played the entire game. It was one play, I think when he missed a tackle, he went down early in the first quarter, and it looked like, oh, my goodness, is he not going to be able to return? Because he walked off very gingerly. But he returned and played the entire game all the way through the double overtime. Now, X is a guy, that you can't replace. It's hard to have him even on the sideline trying to bark out calls because you saw the communication with him during the cadence. You have Wisconsin on the line of scrimmage, and Xavier is recognizing things and getting guys lined up all the way into the snap of the ball. I mean, there's a lot of communication. That's a coach that's on the field with the players, getting guys lined up. And that's really the difference between winning and losing, especially in the passing game, is your alignment and understanding what your assignment is and having great eye control, having your eyes fixated on the guy that you have and not getting seduced by making a big play and jumping in front of someone else. It happens. Even in this game, it did happen. Saw Amir Speed make a mistake like that. They gave up a touchdown in the first overtime, which cost them, to go to a second overtime. But those things, he was able to bounce back and make those adjustments because you have a leader like Xavier Henderson in the lineup. Not only that, the pass rush, Jacob Slade, he's back. A guy who's Pro Football Focus rated as the #1 defensive tackle in the Big Ten. You have a push like that in the middle. If you ask any quarterback, what is the most feared rush? Everybody thinks about the blindside rush, but it's truly that inside pocket push. That's what makes them, it blurs their vision. It makes them uncomfortable. They worry about stepping in. They would rather step up in the pocket and make the throw down the field and not worry about the outside rush. But with a guy like Jacob Slade, that really gave Wisconsin a lot of fits in the middle and allowed guys like Jacoby Windman to get home and make plays.
Yeah, it really makes you think. Obviously, injuries are a part of football, but it makes you wonder where Michigan State might be this season if they had Henderson for the entire season. They obviously did not have him for the Washington, Minnesota, and Ohio State games as well. So a lot left to wonder there. But as far as this bye week and heading into Michigan, huge game ahead for the Spartans. What would you like to see Michigan State do and accomplish this week, getting ready for the game? And ultimately, what do you think they need to do to be ready to play Michigan in a week from Saturday here?
I think that the most important thing for Michigan State to do is watch film, get in the film room, and get healthy this week. I know the coaches are out on the recruiting trail this week, going out and securing kids for the future. That's a very important part of the program as well when they have a little time off. But from a conditioning standpoint, strength conditioning, you're going to see more, guys getting healthy by doing their conditioning, they're running, they're lifting weights, and they're watching a lot of film. Preparing, mental reps is one thing that's not talked about a lot. The mental reps of watching film is just as important as going through it physically. And you see more veterans in the NFL level, like guys like Tom Brady. He's not out on the practice field taking a bunch of reps. He's watching a ton of film. He's a guy that, if you look around, everyone who's ever played with a guy says you can't beat him into the facility. He's always there. Doesn't matter if you get there at 4:30. He's already there with a cup of coffee. A second cup of coffee by 4:30 in the morning. So their success literally leaves clues. So you have guys doing a lot of that and preparing for what Michigan's going to do. They're not a very complicated team, in my opinion. They're going to try to run it down your throat. As you've seen what they did against Penn State, over 400 yards on the ground. We got Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, guys that are just dynamite runners. They have their own unique styles. So Michigan State has their work cut out for him there. J.J. McCarthy now being the guy that's under center. He's a dynamic quarterback where he uses legs as well as his arm. Has not been a guy who has beat people a lot down the field, which is what Michigan State is not good at defending with those accurate down the field passers. So I think the matchup is a lot better for Michigan State. But the other thing is keep it quiet. Don't give a lot of bulletin board material if you're in that locker room for Michigan State. I know they're being told on both sides of the ball, don't tweet things, don't say things that's going to ignite a fan base or, better yet, tick off your opponent that's in the locker room. So, that's the other thing. Get healthy, shut up.
All right, final score predictions for you here. Or any guesses for how the game might go?
This is going to be, in my opinion, it's going to be a very prolific game. I think this is a night game. This is what the players like to do. I know that old guys like me are like, we want the earlier games and all that stuff. But no. As a player, you want to be in those night lights. Like it reminds you of playing in high school. So you're going to see a lot of activity. I don't care what the temperature is. Aside from a downpour, a torrential downpour happening, I'm thinking this is going to be one of those 38 to 42 types of games that the Michigan State can come out on top. Well, a high-scoring, high-flying game. You're looking for guys like Jaden Reed and Keon Coleman just to go off against the Wolverines.
All right, Jason, thanks so much for joining us today, man. And people who are watching, don't forget to check out the This Is Sparta podcast on Apple, iTunes, and Spotify, anywhere basically you guys can find your podcast, and follow This Is Sparta on all of your social media platforms. Jason, thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys again next week.
All right, looking forward to it. Go Green.